So I'm very familiar with all of these people and their work. I've been living and breathing it for the last week or so, and I want everyone in the room to have the same experience tonight. So I'm going to begin by asking each of you to share with us like a defining moment in your creative journey, in your career. Do you have a pivotal or an aha moment, if we're going to paraphrase Oprah, when you realised that you alone or with the people around you could make a significant positive impact on your community? Abraham, I'm going to start with you.
I'll start off with when I ran my first event, 6-6. It was at the gasometer. Like, it was the best night of my life and the worst night of my life. It went amazing on the night, and obviously later on, some tragic happened. But like, I figured like, oh, if I can bring a lot of people in one place, like I can really do this, you know? So that gave me a motivation to keep going.
Even in the midst of something kind of harsh, you had a community around you. Yeah,
100%. You gotta keep on going regardless if anything happens, you know, because that's all you got.
And it was the early days. You had a long way to go.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I had no guidance. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, so I just like, let me just keep going.
Kieran, what about you? What was that turning point moment?
One of my turning point moments, because there's always many I think for all of us, but I was invited to do a TEDx talk, and they were kind of just like, you can talk about anything. I was like, cool. So I decided that I wanted to explore what the purpose of dance was, at least the style of dance that I do in society. So I do street dance, which is a bit different to like the other styles of dances, and essentially the whole premise was like, doctors heal and teachers educate, but like what do dancers do? It feels silly just to be on stage and I just move my limbs to music and then people clap, and it's like, what does that even do? And then upon reflection, I realized that, and you all may have had an experience like this, when you see a performer and they're so immersed in their performance that you get out of your own body and you join with them. And I realized that you can create moments, transient moments for people, for them. You can alleviate suffering on like a short scale. And that was the first like, oh, I can actually take what I do and use it for something outside of just art itself. And then since then, I've just been on a journey of like, how can I maximize that?
I've watched your TEDx talk. It's great.
Oh my God, it's not that great. It is not that good at all.
You had performers with you. It was like, TEDx didn't know what hit it.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Emma, your turn. What was your kind of pivotal aha moment?
I don't know if I can beat that though. That was pretty good. I didn't do a TEDx talk, but I think the aha moment for me was when I studied fashion at university, and I think just being in the surrounds of very like-minded people. I grew up in the country, so there was very few of those from where I was from. So when I started uni and studied fashion, I was like, finally, I'm with my people, I'm with my tribe. And then I started to realise that I could actually work towards something that's creative, but also I can earn a living, but also I can express myself through doing that. And it was a really great thing for me too, as someone that was queer, to just like experience such a, I think, a plethora of different dynamics of gender there as well. So I think it was like the starting point for me to just really build this amazing career I've had, and I still reference it a lot today, which is really good.
Nathan, what about you? Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, I've coming up to 10 years in the fashion industry as a model, and for me, the last couple of years for First Nations representation has really taken off, especially with the talent we're seeing on the runways and the designers we have. But the moment that I thought I could contribute more was I was asked by the Melbourne Fashion Festival to come up with something that was to help that space. And for me, working for so many years, coming up to a decade, I never saw other First Nations people in the room, on set, shooting with, even people calling and booking. So I saw that there was this great leap that was taken for designers and models. But in that moment, I thought, what about the creatives that make up our industry behind the scenes? So photographers, stylists, creative directors, hair and makeup, journalists, social media is such a big part of the fashion game now. So I created Mob in Fashion 2 years ago with that sort of aha moment, and it's just become its own little beast. And yeah, I'm really proud of it, and it's great to see this sector of fashion. And I would say in the last 3 years, it's really kicked off, and it's become a viable career path for First Nations creatives, from artists through to, finding or flexing different muscles that are creative, and fashion's a great way to do that. And that's how Mob in Fashion was born out of that.
That idea of a pathway is so significant, right? Because like having a face on a magazine is incredible, but having opportunities and creating opportunities in careers for so many other people is like a whole different beast.
Yeah, it's like just about those building blocks and being able to find a foundation to like everyone to contribute to that. I feel like Mob in Fashion has become a really good bouncing board for the industry. You're not tied to us. You got a chance to learn, and depending on your experience, we'll help you find your feet. Yeah.
Abraham, you founded 66 Records not far from here, and you were just a teenager, like you said, when you did it. I'd like to go back to that. When you started the label, what were you seeing in African Australian music at the time, but what were the ways that you could see that it needed to be supported and encouraged and it wasn't, and you were the person who could maybe try to do that?
Well, like we all know in all the other countries, the big countries, UK, America, like the Africans are making music, and you know what I mean, like putting on for their cities. So I was like, all right, in Australia, what's going on here? There's nothing really happening. I like doing music. I was doing music at the start. I like doing business as well, but I wasn't the most talented musician, rapper, let's say. And my surroundings, the people around me that could do better than me. So I was like, all right, let me go in my strong suit, which is business, and connect it together and see what I can do for my fellow Africans.
Did you already know a bunch of artists? Like, were they your friends, or did you go out and
Yeah,
looking
they were
for them?
homies. They were homies. But obviously, it's like they didn't call themselves artists. They was just like, oh, I'll come here. You know what I mean? I'll come to the studio. Let me just see what I can do. Yeah.
And being signed to a label, it kind of professionalizes that, right? It makes them feel legit.
Yeah, 100%.
Another origin story I'm keen to hear about is yours, Kieran. Can you tell us a little bit about the impetus behind starting Kapow For the World and like embracing that impact that dance could have beyond just entertaining people, and what has kind of sharing that knowledge and building that community in Sydney done for the people around you?
For sure. So I'd done a couple of events under different umbrellas, but just with the idea of, in street dance, it's like very community-based. Everything's like grassroots. And so I was just like one piece to the puzzle of just making sure that that extended into the future to give the younger generation a place. People find street dance for different reasons, and so I just wanted to do that. But shortly after the TEDx thing, I was left thinking, like, how can I continue to make an impact? Because I was thinking, me by myself, I can only do so much sort of as an individual person. Is it possible, like being a part of this community, can I leverage it in a way to make even bigger impact? And it got me thinking like, oh, well, we hold these events and we just get this money in and we reinvest it. Surely there's a way that I can like redirect that. And so I read a book that was quite pivotal, which was Doing Good Better or something by Will Maxkill. It's about effective altruism. And essentially, long story short, there's billions of people worthy of our charitable work, and like he just says like that we live in a time where we can do so much good for so little of giving. Like you can only give like 10%. It still does such a great work if you do it to effective charity. So I was like, cool, I'm going to take that philosophy and do it to events. But I was like, my first one, I'm just going to donate everything to charity. And so I just got really inspired after reading this book. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do something like this. The word kapow just kind of came to, and I liked it. I liked For the World because I was going to do different things, like a competition, so it'd be Battle for the World, or like a workshop, so it was like Workshop for the World, so everything stayed under that. Anyway, long story short, so sorry. I did this first event, and what I realized is that a lot of people want to do good, and so it was the most successful event I did because it meant that people could play a part in something larger than ourselves, which was really cool. And so that's kind of was like the fire I needed to be like, cool, I'm going to take the ball and run with this and see where it goes.
As you were talking, I also had the realization that like dance, I imagine outside of like one performance that exists just for one night, or like a battle or a workshop that are really contained little moments in time, what you're doing makes it kind of a long-term thing that people can come together and like be part of something regularly.
Yeah, it's very, again, because street dance is a very community-based thing. I mean, hip-hop is a very community-based thing. And so, yes, there kind of always has been that long game in it, and I'm only one piece to that puzzle of that. But it's just cool adding in the new philosophy of like, we can actually just redirect. If you can bring more people in because people want to do good, and then you can just donate the excess off to charity, which is so sick.
Emma, I want to go back to you as that teenager in your hometown. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to bring it up.
Back to Warwick Nabil we go. Yeah.
But I really want to know about who you had as role models growing up, who you looked to, what impact they had, what they kind of showed you could be possible for a career in fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this is something more so that happened at university. I had really good role models like throughout primary school, high school, but it wasn't really until like, 18, 19 that I was like, no, I really want to go into a career in fashion. So I had I had in particular a couple of really good lecturers at uni that really gave me just little pieces, I guess, of cheese or carrot, or dangled the carrot for me a lot in terms of like,
They gave you a charcuterie board.
They did of like, no, look into this designer or look into this artist. But it wasn't just that, like now that I reflect on that, and it was more so too just the development of myself, like the development of my queerness, of kind of just my interests, and they really kind of were fundamental in that. Yeah, so it was really good. There was so much to it. There was so many artists that were thrown around. Like, I mean, for me, like the designers I was looking up, they generally have this essence of disruption. So, the likes of Westwood and McQueen, Grace Jones, like Patti Smith, like they're all significant people, but they all do something that disrupts the industry. And generally, I think my styling work is in a similar vein. It's not as disruptive, but it starts from that level. So it was really, really good.
They're all names too that I think something they have in common is that they worked in the underground until they got mainstream attention, but they like preserved some part of like their weirdness or their freakness
which
when they got
like.
popular.
Yeah, which I think is really essential too. And I think I see people, in a commercial eye now still doing the same, and I really respect that because you have to maintain that, otherwise you just become part of the machine and then you lose all sense of that.
Nathan, the work that you're doing with Mob in Fashion, I was reading about it in preparation for tonight, and I was really struck by what you said as one of the objectives is to remind everyone that First Nations people are not just the subjects of stories, but the original storytellers too. And I'd love to know how fashion has been like a vehicle for storytelling in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, just from my personal experience, like it was something I originally came from an athlete's like background. I played field hockey and did lots of stuff with that. And so yeah, it was, a way for me to like tap into another part of myself, which I found I always loved art and being creative and stuff like that. But fashion really gave me a chance to flex that sort of creativity in a way I didn't realize I had, which was I loved modeling, I loved working with creatives and telling that story. So I developed that kind of skill set as a model, which takes a while, and you have to kind of have it naturally too, which was interesting to find out. And I kind of view that for myself as I've always been a Noongar man, so I just carried that with me, and that was able to transfer into the kind of work I've done as a model and the opportunities that have come about, like creating mob in fashion, or now seeing new creatives come on the scene and bringing their culture with them. I think we try and have a focus on the skill set of what you want to achieve in fashion, which I think harnessing your skill, and no matter what area you work in creatively or whatever industry you are in, you always carry yourself with you, and that's kind of part of your personal style. And I've noticed with the photographers we work with, the models, the designers, sometimes, their storytelling is like who they are, and it's intrinsic in their work. And that's just something that I love. I get the most joy out of seeing the creatives we work with flourish, and they really, the success stories we have in one of our girls, Grace. She started off as a model, and she was like, I think I kind of she studies fashion as well, but she was like, I really like behind the scenes, and she works with our team, and she was just assisting at first, and then through my work with, as a friend of David Jones, I then created a relationship there, and we created an internship with them at Jones, and then because of how she was progressing, put her through that, and now she's just like a gun. But it's great to see that the impact of her, where she's from, that storytelling, she's brought it into her fashion world and her designs that she does at uni. And I think that's just there's so many stories to draw on in for fashion. And I always say that it's such a unique part of our industry, the First Nations sector, because there's nothing like it in the world. So I know it's very early on, but that's what excites me, and that's what why I want to collaborate, to share everyone's stories and designs, and so it's just exciting.
Yeah. In a similar vein to the question I asked Emma, I would love to hear who you kind of looked to growing up, who was made an impact on you, whether in fashion or in other areas of culture.
So I'll fashion specific. My eldest sister, Shannon, was one of the first signed and working Aboriginal models to have, and she's had a really long career. And also Samantha Harris, obviously. I always credit Sam, because with someone like her, there wouldn't be someone like me that's been able to, hold that space for mob as a model or in that fashion industry, because it's very fast. So models are in and out, and people try, but to have longevity and to have such a career is a real credit to Sam. And she, I feel like she did it alone for a long time. So I'll always give her props and shout her out.
Yeah, absolutely. Abraham, I find so many similarities between the work that you've done and what Nathan's doing with mob in fashion, the idea of creating opportunities and pathways. You started signing artists, and now you're managing and you're producing, but you're also putting on shows, you're doing tours, you're bringing artists out to Australia. Have you seen over the years more and more gaps emerging and just figuring out ways to fill them to make sure that these artists are given just as many opportunities as anyone else?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I can build the gap that's missing. And I feel everyone, whatever you do in life, you should feel like you're the best at it. You know what I mean? Even though you're not, but you should go in it with the thought of, oh, I'm gonna be the best.
I can be.
Yeah.
Who says?
I want to learn from everyone, and
What's the next thing you're going to start doing and
who knows?
be the best at?
Probably start dancing as well.
I got you, bro. I got you.
I see a connection. Something I'm really curious about, I'm going to jump to Emma and then I'm going to come back to you, Kieran. I'm really curious, Emma, about, you mentioned going to fashion school, and that's kind of like the source, like the little, like, kind of microcosm in the petri dish kind of thing that everything spawns from in fashion. I'm curious, when we're talking about like affecting change on magazine covers or in jobs or on runways, how far back do you think we need to go to kind of remove gender boundaries, for example, around clothing, or like extricate gender from self-expression?
Yeah, so I think we need to go like almost back to the beginning, like primary school, secondary education. Like there's a lot that needs to be done around just the way we speak about gender. And I think also it's not only the younger people, I think it's more so about the education that their parents need. I know in Melbourne and Sydney there's a few primary schools, because I've got friends that have kids who are gender neutral, or they're, on the spectrum of gender, and they don't wish to say they're male or female, which I think is incredible to have that insight when you're 6 or 7, to be able to speak that way and your parents to, understand that. But that's in cities. So, I can only imagine what's still happening. And, I myself being from that country too.
I'm sorry.
I know, I can see your face. You just want to keep saying it. It's fine. It's addictive. I get it. It's just, I think we need to start from a very, early point. I think universities, especially in creative realms, do a very good job of speaking to forward ideas. So, for example, when I was at university, I studied corsetry, and I chose to make a corset for a male, but I wanted to put it on another form that wasn't female. And that was a decision, and they were very happy and open about that. So, because fashion is very about trend, they'll generally, the high schools or the universities will be very forward-thinking. But, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it needs to start early on. We're getting there, but it's slow.
And it has to happen for not just the fashion kids in the
Well,
cities.
and that's it, exactly. Like, not everyone's going to be into creativity that is interested in being gender diverse or on the spectrum of gender, and I think that's fantastic. So we just need to we just need to understand ways of getting better at it and talking to it properly, and being more inclusive too.
I'd love to hear from all of you on this idea of measuring the impact of your work. Kieran, I'm going to start with you. What are the signs that the work you're doing is reaching the right people or making the changes that you intended to make with it?
For sure. So I kind of see this in 2 tiers, because part of my mission with Kapow is to help dancers become the best dancers they can be through giving them tools to find work or just skill development. And the other part is just money to effective charities that do good. So on one hand, it's just how much money are we sending to those charities? I mean, that's a really easy measurable thing in itself. But even within that, there's certain charities that are more effective than others. Like, the difference between a good and a great charity is actually insane. Like, when you look at these stats, there's things called charity evaluators that you can look at. It's really interesting. As far as on the level of like the community that I help foster, generally speaking, it's just like the things I spoke about, like skill development. If they're better dancers, then yeah, for sure. Something I'm more passionate about is seeing if people ask questions about how they can use the dance to have an impact. So There's been a recent trend, at least in Sydney, Eora, where there's more organisations that are starting to go down that path of like, how can we redirect some of the funds to go to something that they're passionate about? Because obviously there's so many issues in the world, and so yeah, it's great to have. I can start to see a little diverse movement occur where it's like things are going to where things should be going to, and for me, that's how I'm measuring the impact at the moment.
Abraham, what about you? Is it people coming to shows, buying records, streaming songs? Like, how do you measure the impact of your work?
Definitely shows, I'll say, because that tells like you're on the right path to where you need to be if you're selling our shows though. So
Is there kind of, do you hear from young kids or like other people that they maybe want to do similar stuff?
100%. I walk down the neighbourhood here because I grew up in Collingwood. Then little kids coming up saying, you know what I mean, 66666.
Sign me.
There's some, but yeah, you just walking past and say 6666. You know what I mean? That's motivating. That's a good thing to hear. So
Is there merch? Do you see people like
yeah, 100%.
wearing the gear?
Yeah, we had merch, gave it out, sold it, done good. So
Yeah, that must feel
seeing
good.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Emma, what about you?
I try to not get caught up in the culture of, I guess, posting something or, looking to social media to get the recognition. I tend to try and find that from peers that are within the industry that I rely on or I collaborate with, and I can have like really nice, honest conversations with. I rely on them to give me feedback, and I quite often as well, I think just doing it sometimes for yourself is also really good. Like we all have to do jobs or commercial jobs that are just that pay the bills, but sometimes it's really nice. And I think all of us up here would do similar things. It's really nice to do something that's super creative for yourself, but also it's just helps evolve your vision, helps evolve what you're striving for creatively, and you can just keep building and building on that. And also I have a very good partner who also is very good at just, I think, giving me the right amount of feedback at the right time to really just like motivate me to do the next thing or maybe reconsider the way I've went about it and take a different approach. And I think that's also very reassuring too.
I don't know if you ever feel this way, but sometimes it can feel like when you're working, you're just like putting stuff out into like a void, and like the idea of like hearing from
exactly that
the right people at the right times, or even like if a client comes to you for exactly the kind of job you feel like you're destined to do.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I've done something. They figured it out.
Yeah, and it's the creative jobs, I think, that feed into that. It's the ones where you're like, oh, I've gone a bit like wild, I've gone like fucking mental on this. But then it's like that commercial job comes from it, or, the client's like, oh, I saw you do that weird thing. I love elements of that. And, it feeds into it, and that's really good. And it's reassuring because that's intrinsically your vision and it's building on that. You can always water down a really crazy idea as well, and I think that's what's really good.
You can't always make something water up.
Yes, that's
water up. Good one, Brodie.
yeah.
Nathan, what about you? You talked about Grace, is it, who's working with David Jones? Is things like that a really kind of visible way to measure the impact of mob in fashion?
Yeah, I think the way we kind of measure it is watching the creatives we've worked with, how they grow, and what we found is that the relationship we're building with them, that trust we have with each other has served us really well for the shows we put on or the exhibitions we put on, and just the creative work they do outside of mob in fashion. That's probably the best way to see it, because we support their journey, but in that same regard, it's as just myself where I'm at in the fashion industry. I've become a really big bouncing board for the industry side and then my community side as well. So I'm in the middle, like trying to balance everything and just through mobbing fashion. And I think the opportunities that are coming up, like the internship with Jones Magazine, that's a really good way of seeing the industry is opening up this opportunity. We have a partnership with the Australian Style Institute, and they offer scholarships through Mob in Fashion for creatives who want to study editorial or personal styling. And so we've up to 3 people that have gone through that process. So the numbers are smaller through Mob in Fashion, but they're being sustained. And then I look at the other side of the things through the industry and especially the arts sector. The fashion and arts have found each other quite nicely, and I think there's I keep saying sorry.
It's okay.
I can hear myself too. The amount of funding that's coming in to support creatives is another really good way to measure it. And in a business sense, that's really interesting to see because you don't know why it didn't exist before as well. But that's a positive thing. And like, whilst it's very frustrating, you're still kicking these doors down that need to like just keep being booted in. So, yeah.
So something that I was actually planning to ask just Kieran this question, but I think it's really relevant to all the different industries you guys work in. And that's the idea of like a zero-sum game in the creative arts. There can only be one stylist on a job, or there can only be one model for this campaign, or one dancer, or one artist. And so you sometimes get tempted to feel like you're in competition with people. And I'm curious to know if you have a kind of memory of like, or an experience of shifting that mentality from competition towards like community, or like, that old phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. Like success for me is success for everyone in my industry or my community. Like, Kieran, is that something you've experienced?
For sure. So before, it's very hard to kind of give a description of like the dance landscape very quickly, but I began off in more of a commercial dance space. So that's like the stuff that you'd see in music videos, like Dancing Behind Music Artists and on X Factor and all that sort of thing. So that's before I went into street dance, which is more an expressive freestyle form of dance. So when I was in that area of dance, obviously it's very competitive. It's very cliquey. It's very who you know. It's this, that, and the other. And at the time I was doing that, it was kind of pre-Instagram. So it was just mayhem. It was absolute mayhem. I was very lucky to get a lot of the jobs, which did give me a lot of the skills for whatever. But then it wasn't for me. I wanted something more. So then I went into street dance and I found like freestyle movement, and it was amazing. But then I came from working as a dancer to like, there are just no opportunities. And so coming into this community, it's interesting because it is the rising tide lifts all boat. Like in hip hop, there's like crews, and like in music, even like hip hop, there's like groups or like bands or whatever. And as a unit, you can kind of, or as a community, and that's what I've realized, as a community, you can set your own ideals and identity and aesthetic. And as long as that's, someone said good art is universal. As long as you can kind of set your thing in a way that it's universal, these opportunities come. The realization really is that authenticity opts you out of the game, and street dance being a freestyle form of that and being community-based, it was like, oh, wow, we can do this thing together and kind of push forward. And that's what I've really recognized with Kapow, for instance, is that like we've gotten a lot of cool things through that and subsections of it, a lot of cool jobs and collaborations, things like this. So, yeah.
We've got a couple of questions through from you guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask these two, and then I'm going to throw to our final surprise guest, the man behind the room that we're in. The first question is, how do you manage work-life balance or burnout? Abraham, I might start with you. When you're working for yourself on something you're passionate about, how do you look after yourself? What's your self-care?
You want my honest opinion?
Yeah.
I just go out and get lit.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to ask everyone, so whoever has an experience with this, Nathan, I feel like it might be you, but I'm not going to point any fingers. Someone wrote in that they would love to hear the panellists speak to your experiences of mentorship throughout your career. When you were coming up, did anyone hold the door open for you, invite you into a room for your big break, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, for myself in modeling, I'll say that I've had a really good support network around me. When I first got signed, I'd gone up to Sydney, and my then agent told me, "Oh, they just don't know what to do with an Aboriginal boy." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I kind of like left the room thinking, well, all right. And then, that upset me at first. And then I was just like, oh, well, I'll show you what an Aboriginal boy can do. And that just lit a fire that had a trajectory for me, you see models come in and they burn out really quick. I've just been a slow burn, and it's really frustrating at the start. This is probably true to creatives. It can be really frustrating at the start. But I had that fire. I knew that as an Aboriginal man, that was important to be seen. And then to dominate as well, like dominate that industry. And, I feel like with the models that I see coming through now and with the creatives, like I've had like a really small, close group of people that have supported me through that. So in saying that, like I'm really proud of myself that I did all of that, because it's not been done before. And but it's a credit to my family, my community back home, and then my chosen family as well. So somewhere in there's a little magic. So yeah.
There's a lot of magic in there. All right, on the theme of community, the last person we're going to hear from today is the man behind Hope Street Radio, which is much more than a wine bar, and it's had a long life before the doors opened here in Collingwood Yards a couple of years ago. So we're going to hear from Pete Baxter. Please welcome Pete.
Hey everybody, I'll keep it brief. But nice to meet you all, and thanks to Champion for putting this all together. Thanks for the panelists for speaking so eloquently. I guess a brief history on Hope Street. In 2017, I have a background in like music curation and label stuff, and I kind of hit this point where it felt like the just like the DJ vibe, at least what I was exposed to, was kind of like a bit one-dimensional, and I really liked the freedom in radio that people could kind of play whatever they want, and it felt like it felt like a little bit like music in these kind of spaces was about making money as opposed to like actual like exploration and love of music. And so the idea behind it was to kind of provide a platform for people that hadn't necessarily had a chance, and also to run it in a way that it was like whoever was playing had complete agency of what they were playing. And the idea was to try and experiment with that in a public space that was like existing to make money. So the idea of, can you give a bunch of people who have never DJed before absolute freedom in a space and see if that works. And so we started that in 2017, all volunteer, and it kind of grew from there. And it was just like, there was a bunch of friends that I had that had incredible music taste and great connections with community that hadn't necessarily had a chance to do that. And so we started that rooftop bar. Were foolish enough to let us do it, and it kind of grew from there. And I think what was really beautiful about it was it really was a word of mouth thing. So like friends would do it, tell other friends, and the kind of community aspect was really community led. Like it started from the people that I knew, but then the amount of amazing people that I met so quickly and how quickly it grew in that was just a testament to all the people involved in it. Which was, I got to work with Abraham back in the day, doing some shows, and And so we ran it like that until COVID. And then when that hit, obviously, everything kind of went to a standstill. And at that point, I kind of knew about this space because of a friend who was doing the tenancy managing. And because of COVID, no one else kind of wanted to take a gamble on opening up a hospitality type thing in that period. So I met my business partner, Jack, who kind of had a lot more of an understanding about how business works, together with the help of a lot of friends and I guess a lot of the community support that we'd kind of been lucky enough to build over those years. Then everyone really came through, and that was kind of what made it possible, because we had a very small budget and not really much of an idea. And yeah, then it's kind of run into this, and I think we try to hold on to that same kind of spirit of the providing a platform and a place for people to come and to be able to celebrate all those different communities and provide a space for that. And I think this is a really good example of like one of those moments. So it's great to have you all here, and hope you enjoy the rest of the night.
All right, thanks, Pete, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Hope Street, for hosting us. Champion, obviously, for hosting us all. Some of you are sipping on better beer and Dash water. We'd like to thank those guys as well. And finally, please join me in thanking our amazing panel.